Grace and peace. I'm Brian Musser, the Baptist campus minister at Drexel University, and this is Peace and Power Bible Study. The peace of Jesus Christ to change your life, the power of the Holy Spirit to change the world. And we are on a journey through the book of Amos. This is the 5th week in that journey, and we are looking at Amos chapter 5. The title in the entire series is also the title of this week's topic. It's Let Justice Rule, because that is a quote from Amos chapter 5 verse 24. This is the third video of this week, and we are looking at the second half of Amos chapter 5, starting with verse 18. And interestingly enough, in this section, we are going to be looking at the day of the Lord. And this is fascinating because Amos, being written in about BC 760, may be the first written reference of this idea of the day of the Lord, this big judgmental God returning, having a specific day in which the presence of God can be felt throughout the world. This day of the Lord, Amos might be the first one to write it down. However, when Amos writes about it, it is already a known topic to his audience. So he may be the first to write about it, but he is definitely not the first to talk about it, because he already assumes his audience knows and has ideas about it, and he is correcting those ideas in his prophecy. So let's look at the passage. We'll be going through it about a section at a time. And first, we will go at 18 through 20. Woe to you who long for the day of the Lord. What will the day of the Lord be for you? It will be darkness and not light. It will be like a man who flees from a lion, only to have a bear confront him. He goes home and he rests his hand against the wall, only to have a snake bite him. Won't the day of the Lord be darkness rather than light, even gloom without any brightness? Again, we even in this passage see somewhat of a chiastic structure. It starts with this question about what the day of the Lord will be. It will be, darkness and not light. And it ends with that same idea. Won't the day of the Lord be darkness and light? But in the middle, there's this great, great, like 3 statements that are just, awesome. A guy sees a lion, flees from the lion, escapes the lion, only to run into a bear. And it seems like the guy escapes the bear even and is in his own house, puts his hand on the wall, only to get bitten by a snake. The day of the Lord will be as if there was no escape to it. Even if you get away from the lion, there's the bear. Even if you get away from the bear, there's the snake. So it seems like Amos's audience is expecting the day of the Lord to be something good for them. God will come and will, in some way, God's showing up in this day of the Lord will be a blessing for them. And Amos is saying that's not at all what is going to happen. You will be judged by God. Now, Amos 5:21 through 23 is also a fascinating passage here. I despise your feasts. I can't stand the stench of your solemn assemblies. Even if you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. I will have no regard for your fellowship offerings of fattened cattle. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps. Just looking at this passage is very judgmental by God toward the Israelite worship. And it can easily be broken down into 3 ideas, and it's very sensory committed. The Lord can't stand the smell of their feasts. The Lord refuses to look upon their sacrifices. The Lord hates listening to their worship and their songs. So we see, anthropomorphized idea of God here, where God is smelling, God is looking. That whole accept and regard means I will not look upon, I will not, look with favor upon these things, and a God who listens to their worship music. So basically, what Amos is saying is everything the Israelites did, their festive celebrations where they would get together and have these fellowship meals, God, they stink to God. There is a stench to them. When they sacrifice these animals and tithe and give of their proceeds to God, God just refuses to even look upon that. And when they sing these songs praising who God is, God's like, yeah, I hate listening to that stuff. Change the station. So everything the Israelites were doing to engage God and to worship God, God was refusing to pay attention to. Their worship was abhorrent to the Lord. And verse 24 tells us why. But let justice flow like water, and righteousness like an unfailing stream. Instead of worshiping better, the Israelites needed to do justice better and righteousness better. That was the whole thing. They would be able to restore a relationship with God, not through worship practices, but through living justly and righteously. Quick question for us to ponder, and we'll go over this a little bit. What's the difference between justice and righteousness? I would say, personally, I've always and they're intertwined, and you can't have one without the other. But for me, justice is the public, the societal, the social, the interactions between individuals as governed by the society being fair and just. Whereas righteousness is my personal behavior towards others. So I am righteous when I behave well, when I follow God's rules, when I commit to doing what God has told me to do. And justice is a society built on individuals acting righteously toward one another, that the society actually rewards those who live righteously and punishes those who live unrighteously. So justice is the social aspect of it. And we have a big debate today about social justice and all that kind of stuff. Social justice is redundant. There is no such thing as unsocial justice. You can say social justice and just mean justice, because all justice is a public sort of justice. Now, we might need to say social justice because it seems like a lot of us forgot that justice is only in the public sphere between individuals. We cannot be just unless our justice is social, is public, is part of how our society is garnered. Based on those definitions, which one does our current culture struggle with more? Which one do you think about more often? I really think that the Christianity I engage more often than not deals with personal righteousness a whole lot more than they deal with public justice. We think it's okay to just do what is right for ourselves, and that will give us a good relationship with God. We haven't thought through how that extends into the public in a just and fair way. This has a lot to do with the sacred secular divide, where we could, and the idea of private religion, religion as it deals with justice and righteousness can never be private. That is my personal opinion. If you have something different, drop down in the comments below. We cannot separate justice and righteousness, and we cannot separate worship. How we worship God is completely independent on how we live, and if we live righteously, and how we apply that righteousness to the public in forms of justice. A commentary puts it this way: justice refers to the legal matters such as fairness in the courts, and more broadly to the divinely given moral principles by which society has been ordered. Righteousness, which is not transformed but thrown away. And this is a comment on previous verses in Amos. Connotes fulfillment of the responsibilities in a relationship. It focuses on rightness, doing what is right. The two terms together designate a right and just order in society. When justice is overthrown and righteousness is cast to the ground, the result is chaos, and the judgment of God must follow to set things right again. So, according to this commentator, justice and righteousness are intimately connected, and one must flow from the other. Looking at the last verses of this passage, Amos 5:24 through 27, House of Israel, was it sacrifices and grain offerings that you presented to me during the 40 years in the wilderness? But you have taken up Sikkuth, your king, and Kalan, your star god, images you have made for yourself, so I will send you into exile beyond Damascus. Yahweh, the God of hosts, is his name. He has spoken. Just a few comments on this verse, this idea. There's some really unique words in this, and we don't know if it's a transliteration of foreign God names, foreign idol names into Hebrew and their proper names, or if they're somehow rare words for specific things or methods. But we think, and the best judgment is they're the names of gods, foreign idols, translated or transliterated into Hebrew. But I want to look at this. House of Israel, was it sacrifices and grain offerings that you presented to me during the 40 years in the wilderness? That question is kind of phrased like you want it to, you think they're supposed to say no. But did the Israelites sacrifice to the Lord in the desert? Our recordings in the Pentateuch and the Torah seem to point to the fact that they did. Other prophets seem to look at that some of the worship was there. So how does this passage relate? I would guess, and this is a guess, and some of the commentaries back me up on this, that Amos is connecting it to the calf idols that Jeroboam the first set up in Bethel. And he's somehow saying that their worship to these calf idols is akin to the worship in the desert, which was totally and completely destroyed after Aaron formed the calf idols and Moses came back with the Ten Commandments. Was that worship of God? Amos is getting at that when they were worshiping calf idols in the desert, no, it wasn't them. All the other worship was the worship of God. But this worship that looks like what they're doing now wasn't the worship of God. I think that's how it is. I can't complete, and I won't argue. But it's very interesting. And these last couple verses here are very, very interesting to how to interpret it. But the basic idea is because of Israelites' sin, they are going to be judged and they are going to be exiled. So, conclusion, true worship of the Lord is absolutely dependent on living a life of personal righteousness and public justice. That could be the theme of the entire book of Amos. Probably the second theme is you didn't do this, so God's going to come, show up, and judge you. So, homework, if you want to think about this, again, I encourage you to read through the book of Amos in its entirety, preferably in one sitting this week. Specifically, notice how many times the image of a cow or calf is used. And I had you look through and notice how many times the lion is used, but also the calf. And how does complacency and pride affect the Israelites' worship? As always, you can join this conversation two ways: live Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time via Zoom, or these weekly wrap-ups on YouTube and WordPress. I'm all over the social media: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, WordPress, and YouTube. Those links are in the description below. Enjoyed having this conversation with you and hope it continues real soon.